Afternoon. Let's call the meeting of the Apex Planning Board, March 13th, meeting to order. And if we'll take a minute to recognize all the faiths in our community with our invocation. Appreciate everyone joining us this evening for the planning meeting, and look for guidance as we consider all of the conversations and discussions around the growth in our town, and guidance to make the right decisions for the community. Thank you. Now we'll stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any items for information this evening?
Yes, actually, I'd like to introduce our newest senior planner on staff, June Cowles, who actually may be a familiar face to some. June worked with the town for about 13 years, from 2002 to 3 to on, and then moved to California and has come back, and we're happy to be able to have her rejoin our team. So good welcome to June.
Welcome, June. Thank you. All right, I'll now speak about public comment. The purpose of public comment is to allow the public to speak on items that do not appear on the agenda under the public hearings. Any member of the public wishing to speak on public hearing items will be called at the appropriate time later in the agenda. Please take a moment to sign in if you are speaking on a public hearing item. The public comments period is an opportunity for the public to express concerns or opinions, but is not intended to be a question and answer session. During public comment, the public may comment on any non-public hearing items, including new business that appear in this agenda. Comments from the public on new business items will not be taken later in the agenda, so if you wish to speak on a new business item, please do so during public comment. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes is up, the speaker will be asked by the chair to wrap up their comments. If there's a large number of speakers for one particular item, we may ask that a representative be selected to speak for the entire group and limit their comments to 9 minutes. If not, comments on a single topic should not be repetitive in nature. If comments were already made by another speaker, please state agreement with the prior speakers and do not repeat what has already been stated. I trust that everyone has had a moment to review the consent agenda, the minutes on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Minutes are approved. All right, and now we will move to public hearing number 1.
Yes, I'd like to recuse myself from item number 1.
Yes, thank you. A motion for recusal?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you. Lauren.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
This is rezoning case 22, CZ21, Apex Light Industrial. These properties are located in this general area north of US 64 highway. The subject properties are a total of approximately 55.68 acres, and as mentioned, north of US 64 Highway West and east of Goodwin Road. The parcels contain existing structures and vegetation and a Duke easement that runs through the properties. The parcel addressed as 3208 US 64 Highway contains a pond. The properties are currently zoned rural residential, tax flex conditional zoning, and Wake County residential ADW. The adjacent zonings are to the north, Wake County residential ADW, to the east, rural residential, and to the south, plan unit development conditional zoning associated with Smith Farm and Sweetwater future commercial phase, and planned commercial, and to the west, Wake County residential ADW and rural residential. The applicant is proposing to rezone the properties to Tech Flex conditional zoning. The 2045 land use map classifies the subject properties as office, employment, commercial services. The proposed rezoning to Tech Flex conditional zoning is consistent with that land use classification. The applicant conducted a neighborhood meeting on August 24th, and a copy of the neighborhood report is in your packet. I wanted to point out that when the neighborhood meeting occurred in August, there was originally 10 properties being proposed. Since the rezoning, there are fewer properties being proposed. A full list of proposed uses and zoning conditions can be found on page 2 of the staff report. The applicant is proposing uses such as veterinarian clinic or hospital, restaurant general, medical or dental office or clinic, repair and maintenance general, manufacturing and processing minor, and microbrewery. Besides the non-residential architectural conditions, I wanted to point out a few additional zoning conditions. The maximum square footage of uses developed on the property shall be 500,000 square feet. Second one, the used glass sale shall be all indoors except what is stored on trucks. Outdoor truck parking for glass sales use must be fully screened from any public right-of-way. No more than 15% of any building square footage shall include outdoor storage. For number 5, the applicant has proposed this zoning condition. The developer shall dedicate the right-of-way for the future interchange and realignment of Jenks Road according to the Apex Transportation Plan. Staff recommended this zoning condition wording: developer shall dedicate right-of-way for the future interchange and realignment of Jenks Road according to the US 64 corridor study and Apex Transportation Plan. Zoning condition number 6. Developer shall provide a continuous east to west public vehicular route with sidewalk through the site from Goodwin Road to the eastern parcel boundary of the subject property to support the future extension of Lowell Road as planned with the Arden at Summit Pines development. So something in this general area. And number 9, the perimeter buffer along the eastern boundary shall be a minimum of 30 feet and shall be planted or preserved to the type A buffer standard. The buffer may be removed if the adjacent properties are developed with uses of the same or higher land use class according to UDO section 8.2.6B4. The EAB held a pre-application meeting for this rezoning on August 18th, 2022. The zoning conditions suggested by the EAB are listed on page 5 of the staff report, along with the applicant's response to each condition and whether the applicant provided the conditions or not. Approval of the rezoning is reasonable in the public interest because the proposed Tech Flex conditional zoning district will allow for non-residential development in an area that anticipates non-residential uses and encourage compatible development of the property. The rezoning commits to provide a continuous east to west public vehicular route with sidewalk, provides conditions to mitigate the environmental impact above the town standards, and will allow development that will generate jobs and increase the tax base. Planning staff recommends approval of rezoning case 22CZ21 with conditions offered by the applicant. I'm happy to answer questions as well as the applicant who's in the audience.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I'll ask one. On the historical survey, there's a house labeled as a potential historic house at the 3208 address. Was that addressed or looked at, or capillary preservation involved in any way, shape, or form with that?
Not at this time that I'm aware of that the rezoning process, but I can let the applicant provide any information if they reach out to capillary preservation. But I know at site plan during the pre-application process and during site review, we'd probably work with the applicant on that.
Additional questions? All right. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
The applicant care to speak?
Madam Chair, members of the Planning Board, Jeff Roach, Peak Engineering and Design. I first want to start out like I always do, thanking staff, not only Lauren, but also Russell and Shannon, everybody for working with us through the process. I am batting here tonight for Jason Barron, who is typically, he's going to present this to Town Council, so please bear with me. I'm here to answer. As you guys know, I'm a very technical person. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but I do want to go through a couple things real quick. I do want to touch on staff's report in one location, and then address Mr. Hastings' question about historic house. So with me tonight, there's actually a couple of property owners are here. The Wilkins are here. Glenn Futrell, who owns the parcel on the corner, the large parcel that's already zoned Tech Flex, is also, and that's this large piece here, is also here. We also have Bahong is here from VHB as our traffic engineer. So you guys know, because this is a Tech Flex rezoning, it's actually not required to have a traffic study submitted. Our developer said, we're going to need it. Let's do it. Let's understand what's coming. I think Russell sent an email today. We're expecting comments back from staff sometime next week prior to council. But we do have a number of off-site roadway improvements, including a U-turn on 64. We're doing some restrictive movements to the intersection with Goodwin Road and 64. We're proposing a right-in, right-out off of 64. So there's a bunch of improvements, not to mention some upgrades to Goodwin Road to get into the property. Staff touched on a really good point, which was the east-west connection of Lowell Road. If you're familiar with the area, Westford PUD has a street that comes out here. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. That Lowell Road extension is coming in through the recently approved age-restricted community retirement center. They're just north of Jinks Road. We are proposing that to come through our property as a public street that will allow for a future frontage road that may be used in 5, 10, 50 years. We don't know when, but it will be there through our project. It gives us a public street access to Goodwin Road, and it allows that east-west parallel road to stay, try to keep some people off of 64. So a couple design aspects that we're looking at as we continue to play with the layout and the site access. We've crafted a number of additional conditions that are in your packet. I'm not going to go through all of them. Staff touched on a couple of them, but they're focused on high-quality non-residential, bringing jobs to Apex, Tech Flex, light industrial, suburban office setting along that US 64 corridor. Couple of items: we comply with the 2045 land use plan, the Apex transportation plan we're in compliance with, EAB conditions, we've offered a ton of, I think 6 or 7 of them, or 5 or 6 of them. So we're really thoughtful on how we approach this project. This developer is in the process of developing a speculative building that will be for rent. And one of the comments that staff put up, and that's the first time I've seen the language requesting a change to condition number, I think it's 5, Lauren, in relation to the developer shall dedicate right-of-way for the future interchange and alignment of Jinks Road according to the Apex Transportation Plan. That's the first we've heard of it. We have talked about this through the process, but that's the first time I've actually seen the language. It may have gone to Jason. I don't know. Okay. I had staff over there nodding her head. So I apologize for being ignorant on the fact at this point. I think at this point we are unable to commit to that language. I will say that this developer is not going to build something that DOT is going to come mow down, because DOT, when they do a condemnation, they do not reimburse for future loss of income. So our developer understands, we have sketches, we have concept plans that show the future alignment. If an interchange is ever built at Jinks Road and 64, we generally have an idea on DOT's long-range plan where that right-of-way will be, and we have set up our site plans around that to still provide a buffer along the 64 corridor without the loss of parking, without the loss of building square footage. But at this point, we can't commit to it. I can't tonight, simply because it's the first time I've seen it. So we will be working with town council on that language, and we'll have a resolution before we get to council. I apologize for not having an answer for you guys tonight. I hate coming in here not knowing. And I have to address the other thing I don't have an answer for, and that's Mr. Hastings on the State Historic Preservation Office house. I was actually unaware of that. I'll have to go back and double check. I did not see it when we did our real quick review early on, Mr. Hastings, but I'll go back and double check. And if there's a case where we need to get capital area preservation out there, we'll get Jeremy on the horn and get him out there. Okay. So with that, I'm not going to go into any more detail that staff has already gone into. I'm here tonight to answer questions, and I hope I can garner your support tonight to support the zoning for the Tech Flex conditional use, bringing the jobs to this very busy US 64 corridor. So with that, I will cede my time to you guys, ask whatever questions, and hopefully I can answer them.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Roach?
I've got a few questions. I was looking through the packet. I saw that there was some restrictions as far as the width versus, breaking up different architectural pieces to make sure everything on the 64 side looks presentable. It sounds to me like 500,000 square feet is going to be warehouse type buildings. It's not just strip mall full of commercial stuff. That's a big piece.
Yeah, so just so you know, the breakout is not one big 500,000 square foot building. A lot of the conditions that we took actually came from other projects along the 64 corridor, including Gateway 1 and 2. That's where I think a lot of the conditions were crafted from. Our current concept has 4 or 5 smaller Tech Flex buildings in the front, with a larger, more of a truck dock type facility in the back of the site. But we envision it being, and there again, as part of our zoning package, we don't submit building elevations because it's Tech Flex. We will, of course, work with staff, follow the ordinance, and a lot of those conditions were added because we don't submit those building elevations at zoning. But yeah, it will be broken up, different parapet heights, different storefront looks. Think of the typical suburban office. If you go up Davis Drive, just as you get into Durham County, on the right-hand side, I think it's Keystone is the type of development. That's a Tech Flex, single story or story and a half. That's the look that this developer builds. We're doing another project for them up in Cary that's the same exact look.
So you're looking at story to story and a half?
Yeah, I think that's, I don't remember what the max height was.
It wasn't listed.
I don't think we listed because it's an ordinance restriction of, I want to say it's like a 40-foot max height, but don't, Amanda, do you? Okay, I think max is 2 stories, but there again, it's there's a cap on the max height as well, and we're just sticking with the ordinance standards for it.
Do you have a preliminary site plan to show kind of the entrance, exits? It's right on 64, and if you're talking about trucks coming in and out, I'm assuming these are semi-trucks.
I have an early on, very preliminary sketch that I just brought with me. I'd be happy to show it to you. I don't know if you want to.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it goes on the record, but.
No, I understand this is, again, completely preliminary, so it's just, I'm just trying to get an idea how trucks can get in and out of the site.
Excellent. Coming down 64, and I apologize, I'll be happy to show everybody this as we talk to it, or, I don't know, I mean, the projector type thing, but.
One by one, you have to go down.
Exactly. I'll explain it 8 times. But our goal is to have a right-in, right-off of 64 just west of Jinks Road will be a right-in, right-out, and I'll just leave that there because I know the plan pretty well. But it'll be a right-in, right-out just west of 64. As you continue down to Goodwin Road, there'll be a full access or a right-in, right-out, and there'll be a eastbound, so if you're coming from Jordan Lake towards Apex, you'll be able to make a left onto Goodwin Road and come into the site, so all the vehicles have plenty of access getting in and into the site. When they leave the site, they'll have 2 options, and that is basically come out the right-in, right-out here on 64, middle of the site, or it's to come out Goodwin Road. When they come out, they can only go west. We are committing, and our traffic engineer is here for questions as well as if you guys have any, but we are also building basically the U-turn bubble. So if you're heading west on 64, you can make the U-turn to come back towards Apex. It mimics this right here, which Sweetwater built a couple years ago. So it's exactly the same setup. Trucks will come out, get on 64 and make that U-turn. I understand that Apex is currently in the process later this month of closing down Richardson Road to install traffic signals at the Richardson Road, Jinks Road 64 intersection, which will create some gaps in that traffic pattern that will allow the vehicles to come out of our site on the 64. So without getting into too much traffic detail and without pulling Bahung up, that's kind of an explanation. Does that help answer?
It does. So you're saying that coming off of Goodwin Road, traffic would have to be right out going back west, and then at some point they'd have to loop back around to go back because
that's correct.
540 is going to be your.
That's correct.
That's where you're trying to get to.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
yeah, that's a.
Yeah, and that one actually shows. It shows one thing. It does show the U-turn. It may not show the U-turn, but as part of our traffic study that we provided, it does show the U-turn bubble on 64. Again, staff hasn't weighed in on it yet. We have some preliminary discussions with DOT that they're in support, but I'm not going to speak for Russell and say, yes, I support or I don't. That's what our traffic engineer is currently proposing, is only to be able to come out of Goodwin Road and go west. There'll be no crossovers. We don't want that full access. It's too dangerous to try to do that, especially with trucks. So that's a great point. The other thing that plan shows, it also shows a possible extension of Lowell Road from Goodwin all the way back to Jinx to tie into Jinx Road. And then with the signals that are coming at Jinx Road, the ultimate plan, and staff touched on it, we actually came in and did our neighborhood meeting for about 85 acres, which took us a little bit farther. It took us one property short of the retirement facility that was recently approved. We had a property owner or two, something happened, and that 30 acres dropped. So we continued with this with the idea that the 30 acres will eventually come on board. It could be us in a year, it could be 4 years from now, we don't know. But Lowell Road is a reasonable extension pattern to get from Goodwin Road back to Jinx. So we've planned up, we've set up, all our planning and engineering have set up for that extension of Lowell Road as a public street.
Okay.
Long way of answering your question. I apologize for taking
No, I appreciate the detail.
Additional questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Akers.
Two questions. One, I didn't see a commitment, and I think it's because it's now in the UDO about EV charging stations and parking lots. Do you know off the top of your head, by chance, what that would be for something of this scale? How many EV?
10's actually the maximum per the ordinance.
Minimum.
There you go.
Minimum or maximum?
That's a maximum. The maximum, I mean, you could have, for example, Pleasant Park has 900 parking spaces. I understand there's a request for EV parking. The number would be like 5%. That's 45 parking spaces to be EV, but the ordinance is capped at 10. So we are looking at where we can put them around the site. And if you look at the plan there, our proposal is to put like 8 up front with 2 in the back by the larger industrial building, kind of space them out throughout the site.
I guess the reason I asked that is just, there's a lot of affluent people in this area, and if you're doing tech flex, which would presumably have a higher income job, like these are people that would potentially have higher end cars like Teslas, and would there be a warrant to go more than 10? And is that something that you guys have thought
I will
about?
tell you, we will have at least 10. The ordinance maximum is 10. If the developer comes back and says, hey, we do see the need for additional ones, absolutely, we'll add them in a heartbeat. So, but as of right now, we're planning on 10 throughout the site, but we haven't gotten to the site plans yet either. So we're still a couple months out on that. So, and the developer is watching too, by the way. So he's down in Charlotte. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight, but I will talk to him and Jason.
It was just a question.
It's a great question.
Yeah, no, the real question though is stormwater, nutrients, nutrient removals. We're in the critical watershed, right up against White Oak. What are your thoughts?
So ordinance requires TSS removal, 85% TSS removal right off the bat, on top of the stormwater controls, the volume controls. We're actually working on a condition, and I'll run it by you before we get to town council, to do some type, because there is not a state or Jordan Lake watershed requirement. You were correct when we spoke earlier about no nutrient requirements per the state in the Jordan Lake Cape Fear. So we're actually working, Daniel and I are working on a commitment to set a maximum nitrogen level. And then what will happen is our stormwater ponds will treat not only TSS, but also nitrogen removal. It may not be to the level of what the Neuse River requires, but it is something, being that we're in relatively close proximity to White Oak Creek and Jordan Lake. So yeah, I thought about it after we talked. And I think there's a way we can do something that provides a little bit higher level of treatment.
And I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Roach, TSS?
Oh, I'm sorry. Total suspended solids. In Apex, you're required to treat the detention requirements. 1, 10, 25 is what we've committed to from a volume, how quickly the water runs off. The ordinance also requires 85% TSS, total suspended solids. So it lets certain like heavy metals, the mud and stuff that you see in the brown water, let some of that settle out before it gets into the water course, in this case, White Oak Creek. What happens is the state has different rules for the Neuse Basin, which is east of 55, and the Cape Fear, which is west of 55. So what we're doing is we're looking at the requirements that are on the state level in the Neuse River and see if we can bring them over onto this site. Because of the proximity to White Oak, it's not something we do everywhere, but based that we're relatively close to White Oak Creek and Jordan Lake, it's a really good question for Mr. Akers if we can look at something. And we'll talk to the developer about doing it too. It's pretty easy to do. It's just we have to watch what our numbers are. So yeah, I'll work with Mr. Akers and council on crafting some language.
Additional questions? I have a question, but I think it's probably more for Lauren, given So I don't, you might want to stand there just
I'll
in
stand
case.
here
you
just in
have
case
it.
I can help.
It is about the historic site and kind of what our next steps, if it is determined that there is a historical site. I understand you didn't have those answers, but just in case, okay.
Sure. So I'll double check with, I'm going to review the historic registry, and I'm going to work with CAP and see what they recommend. But ultimately, CAP will provide us a recommendation, but we'll make sure that the applicant and CAP are in touch. And then we'll determine, especially at site plan, what their recommendation is. So just because this is overall rezoning at this time, it's not site plan specific. So I think that is why that wasn't determined at this time. But now that it's on our radar, we'll make sure we work with capital area preservation.
Will we have some information for council?
I'll make sure that it occurs either at staff report or there is something at our existing conditions talking points.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much.
Russell, I saw that you moved. Did you have a?
Yeah, I want to make a clarification just so nothing's misrepresented in front of planning board. Staff did make that comment, that requested condition at the beginning of this rezoning, and the applicant has argued with us about that. So it's not something new. It's not something we just brought up. I want to make sure that's clear, and I can be ready to discuss that if you'd like to. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Russell, while you're there, if you may, what's the latest on that diamond with Jinx Road? And I know it doesn't affect specifically this property, but if you're looking at connecting Jinx Road into this parcel, if you go east from here, as far as access, because I think that would actually be a better access to get in and out, especially if you get these trucks coming in and out to circle back onto 64 versus coming off of Goodwin Road.
You're asking about direct access to?
So I remember there was a diamond and there was a buffer that was, I believe, relinquished, and that was with the hotel at Sweetwater. And that came up, and I'm not with the NCDOT, and I remember there was going to be kind of a constricted diamond right there. I'm not sure if that's completely off the table and it's only going to be signaled, or is this going to be something now that still could have the interchange?
The long-term plan is still an interchange at this location.
Okay.
The issue we had with Sweetwater was, as part of that zoning, we got a right-of-way reservation, and they came back later arguing that we can't hold that reservation forever. So since it was just a reservation, town council went back and made the decision for the rezoning to remove that reservation. There's still an interchange shown on the plan. So we did make some additional adjustments. We worked with the developer, Sweetwater, so it's still possible a compact diamond type interchange could fit in there. It's really tight. There would be some impact to the south on Sweetwater's site. So if, when DOT moves forward with that, they'd have to work with them to try and figure that out and avoid impacting structures if at all possible. The reason we're asking for the condition the way we are, the reservation based on the US 64 corridor study and the Apex Transportation Plan, is the Apex Transportation Plan doesn't identify the specific outline for the shape of the interchange. If you look at the US 64 corridor study, to the north side, it is a compact diamond type design. To the south, they had a loop and a ramp on the southwest corner. Sweetwater's engineers came back in and redesigned that to a compact diamond to get rid of that loop. So it's a more compressed interchange, really the minimum you would need for an interchange at that location. Okay. So when this shows the original in the US 64 corridor study. So if you look at where that loop and ramp are on the southwest corner, that's what Sweetwater's engineers revised to show a compact diamond. So essentially it's just two diamond ramps, sort of like the Salem Street interchange at US 64, where you've got those really closely spaced intersections. So it'd be something like that. So the reason we're asking for based on this is because their design didn't change the north side. It's basically squeezed that south side, which makes the north side even more important to make sure that we get that right of way. And we are asking for a dedication, similar to when we asked for dedications of, ultimate right of way on roadways for the future, like a 4-lane divided roadway. Because we see this as being the minimum that's absolutely needed. If you don't get it, obviously I hear, the discussion about, and this is some of the argument that's come back, that they'll work with DOT and work with staff to make sure that they avoid those areas. I mean, again, if we don't get that condition defined well in the zoning, then I'm not sure how well we can enforce that in the future to make sure that there aren't things in the way of the interchange when it does move forward.
I'm not a traffic engineer, but I do believe that intersection, it is imperative that in the future that happens.
Yeah, long-term, the traffic volumes definitely warrant an interchange on US 64. And the US 64 corridor study was adopted by the MPO, so it was a joint effort between DOT and county governments and cities. So it was, you know, it was the largest effort that we've had to date studying this corridor as a whole. So what we are trying to do is implement as much as we can of that study. Most of what we're doing now is, you know, interim measures, the short-term improvements, which are the super streets, for instance. But eventually down the road, you're going to need to see interchanges. And right now we're seeing, you know, shorter term programming, funding actually going toward the NC 751 interchange. So that's probably the first one you're going to see on this corridor, you know, in this vicinity. And this one, you know, may not be too far behind. It's currently not funded, but, you know, they do update the state TIP, and we're monitoring that to see, you know, when that does show up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Also, I have two questions. The southern alignment, I guess that was, or southern right-of-way ask from the Sweetwater folks. We heard that, gosh, a year ago, where they came in and they asked for a reduction in that, or an alternative design. I think, I don't remember our vote, but I think it was to vote it down. We did not agree with that because we wanted to allow for future right-of-way. What did council end up voting on?
They voted to remove the right-of-way reservation. I believe we did get some concessions on the buffer, if I remember correctly. So in the future, that buffer would go away, but there would be some additional room to squeeze in a tight diamond interchange. So it's still possible there, but it's going to require a little bit more in terms of retaining walls and other things to avoid impacts. And there will be some site impacts as a result of that.
So is that tight diamond consistent with this sketch that we're looking at here?
It is similar, except on the north side it'd be the same, but on the south side where that ramp, the loop is shown, that loop goes away and that ramp squeezes in close to US 64 where the other ramp is. So it's essentially just a diamond with no loops in the revised design.
Part two of the question, looking on the north side, then the frontage road appears to be critical to allow folks to get from Jenks to a limited right-of-way along 64. Jeff, when he was up here, was alluding that they were committing to connecting Lowell through their street in an east-west. Would that not serve a similar purpose to what this is showing?
That's correct. And as far as those service roads go, the way that's shown with that alignment, it was conceptual in the US 64 study. So if DOT was to come into that area without any development to build an interchange, this was their proposed design in that study. If the area develops as they're proposing to do, then they would be responsible for figuring out an alignment for that roadway, and we'd work with them on that. So there is flexibility in terms of those east-west connections for those collector roads, but with respect to the interchange, it's very constrained there. So we really don't, you know, if you take much more right-of-way away, you're not going to have room for an interchange in the future.
Does this project have a lot of right-of-way along that interchange area? I know the original version might have, but what about the remnant parcels?
Yeah, so as far as their boundary, you're looking at this area.
Yeah, right there.
This corner. Yep.
Right.
Is this plan available to us?
Yes, it's actually online. If you go on and search for US 64 corridor study, it should come up with the NCDOT website.
So I guess, is there a solution here that the town of Apex and DOT could work with, if not this one, if there's an east-west connector that's proposed per the applicant's condition in the zoning? Or are you saying that just doesn't work?
Regarding, well, we have agreement on the east-west connector language in their condition. It's the zoning condition with respect to the right-of-way dedication for the interchange itself. So they would work with us on an alignment for that east-west connector, but the interchange they had asked to refer to, and I don't know, Lauren, if we can go back to that slide just to show the change. It seems like a relatively minor change in wording, but again, that clarification is to make sure that we have something to go by as far as the footprint for that right-of-way dedication, and that the US 64 corridor study provides that dedication for that ramp in the area on the project, in the project frontage.
Additional questions for Russell or for Lauren?
Thanks.
Thank you, Russell.
Mr. Sherman, can I?
Yes.
Just real quick. I'll try to be quick. I apologize. And Russell, thanks for the clarification. I wasn't saying that we hadn't seen the condition. I hadn't seen this language before tonight, so I apologize, the exact condition. We were going under the idea that the first one was what we were proposing. As for the right-of-way, like I said, this is kind of relating itself to the NCDOT's MAP Act. We're being asked by Apex to reserve right-of-way for a study that was done that we don't know what it's gonna look like at the end of the day. So Apex is asking us to do something that DOT can't even require this project to do, which is dedicate right-of-way. So that's why we can't commit tonight. That's why Jason Barron is the attorney. I wish he were here to speak on behalf of it, but that's why I can't tonight say, yes, we agree with this language. We need to work it out with the lawyers and let those guys figure it out. So just real quick clarification on that,
So,
on the right-of-way section.
and so I think my question to you is if approved by council with or approved by planning board with recommendations going forth to council, I assume that Jason would be prepared to.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. We'll have it, and we're starting our meetings with the council over the next 2 weeks as we ramp up to the council meeting, and we'll have those discussions with them as well and figure out what the best option. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just, I'd like to add real quick, and just to be clear, that's why staff's recommendation is still a recommendation for approval despite the change in wording, since there is the concern about the MAP Act, that it did not affect our recommendation.
Last question for you.
Sorry, I sat down too fast.
No, this should be an easy one. In the Smith Farm PUD, there's an airport that basically would bisect this property. So I think Shelley, had put up some language, and I think she could probably share that with you, but I think that could be adopted. Basically, it's just informing people around the area that there's low-flying airplanes.
You provided it to me on
notification.
The Triangle Home Services one across the Tobacco Trail, but I haven't seen it on this one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I mean,
should be a non-issue, being the building height's restricted anyway.
Yeah, if staff will send me the note.
It's just to protect the people around the area, so that way, if there's any complaints, there's notification that this has been years.
I don't.
Not to affect the other.
No, that's no problem at all. If staff would send us the language, we'll be happy to evaluate it, put it in the condition.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, comments from board? All right, with that, I will open the public hearing. All members of the public wishing to speak out on this agenda item, please come forward, grab the sheet. And Amanda, do we have any comments that have been submitted?
No, ma'am, not from email.
Okay, thank you. Mr. or Mrs. Wan?
Yeah,
Did you want an opportunity to speak?
He's a traffic engineer. He's here to.
I'm here not to answer any question you may have regarding traffic study, but we have been working with NCDOT and with the town staff on their mobility and access, and then a lot of other comments tonight. Yeah, we are ready to just, waiting for the review comments issued by DOT and then move this forward.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, thank you. All right, if any other questions or comments from the public? Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing. Bring it back to the board for discussion or possible motion.
I'll go first. Wait to hear what the other board members say, but in general, I'm supportive of this. I live close to this area, but driving by the site, knowing that we have VinFast, we have the Toyota plant, we have Wolfspeed at the other end of the county. This is on the Chatham County line. I think there's something like 6 million square feet of office and industrial needs in the coming few years to support these at the second level. So this meeting that, keeping it in Apex, I'm excited about the business development aspect, and it's non-residential for once. So I like that. I did voice my concern over the nutrient controls, as this is in the critical watershed that leads to the Jordan Lake. So I was happy that the applicant's working towards resolving that with council. So I'm generally in support of this. I don't love it that it's in my backyard, but again, I like what it does for the community, not just, what I don't like about it. I love what it does for us all. So in general, I'm in support. I was waiting to see what others say.
So, any further discussion or comments?
Ryan, I'll join you in that, and being that it seems like the location is ideal, especially with being Tina fits the land use map.
Right.
And my only concern would be, and I think just make sure we get this taken care of before council, is the traffic study and figure out how these semi trucks, because that's what's, it's gonna be a lot of movement coming in and out of there. I just want the safety on Highway 64 is gonna be of utmost importance, so we just can't stress that enough. But outside of that, I think if we can work through those details, I think it's a good location for what we're doing.
And I will build off of that. And, definitely the fact that it fits the land use map is definitely one of my major concerns. And just, we have the opportunity here to get the traffic right on the front, which is a rarity. So I'm excited that these conversations are happening. And Amanda, thank you for clarifying where conversation is going to go before council around the MAP Act and the concerns. So put it back before the board for possible motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve case 22 CZ 21 Apex Light Industrial as presented in the staff report, with consideration by council for additional stormwater and what was the other? I think it was stormwater. Was there anything on the historic? Did we want to make? No. Okay, that was my recommendation, with consideration for clause on nutrient removal for stormwater.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 2.
We need to bring Keith.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank
Bring
you.
me back in the room.
Can I have a motion to bring Keith back in?
I'll make a motion to bring Keith back in.
Thank you. Sorry, Keith. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, Keith.
Let's keep him out.
All right.
I second, and I think
Did we have-
Ryan made a motion, I second.
All right. Shannon, number 2, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. The next public hearing is regarding proposed amendments to the transportation plan. These are associated with the next item on your agenda, the rezoning case for 22 CZ 22 Elevate 64 PUD. And so as typical, we recommend having the public hearing, but waiting to vote until after the rezoning case. So to orient you to the area, this is US 64, popular topic tonight, and Olive Chapel Road. We are east of New Hill Olive Chapel Road and west of the American Tobacco Trail. The area to propose for rezoning is outlined here in yellow. So you can see that many of the proposed amendments are actually outside of the area to be rezoned. So we'll start, and I'll follow the numbered bubbles here. We'll start with the proposal for Lawson Lane. So currently Lawson Lane is a private, unimproved street. It's not dedicated right-of-way. It does extend from Olive Chapel Road to US 64 in this location. Our adopted transportation plan shows a local connector street, so more of a residential street, approximately following Lawson Lane from Olive Chapel Road to this future local connector extending from Lovage Drive. So the proposed amendment is to further extend that roadway all the way up to 64, where it would serve as the main access point for this proposed rezoning.
It's proposed for upgrade to a major collector street, since it would now connect fully from Olive Chapel Road to US 64, and that would not allow access by new single-family residential driveways. And then there's a slight recommendation to shift the alignment in this location to avoid impacts to a historic home and pond. The second proposed amendment is to realign the local collector extending from Lovage Drive west of this new major collector, and then realign and upgrade that to a major collector street between the new major collector and Transit Trail. This was not a request from the rezoning. This was a recommendation from staff looking at the proposed multifamily in this area and thinking about possible future transit routes. We don't have anything on our transit plan map now, but if we're able to have transit here in the future, we want to make sure that we have roadways that could serve those routes. Also, our emergency services departments were supportive of having that connectivity there. The third proposed amendment is to add a future local connector on the southern property line of the PUD, extending to a substreet to the east. This would eventually connect to the local connector being built through the legacy PUD. And showing this on our transportation plan would make it transparent that there will be a need for a connection across this intervening property should that redevelop in the future. I'm actually going to skip to the greenway change, so number 5 here. The adopted plan shows a greenway, extension of Reedy Branch Greenway, where we have these green X's. With the addition of the local connector, the proposal is to actually follow the street side along the major collector and the local connector, where it would meet with the approved alignment within Legacy PUD. That would minimize land impacts and stream crossings by allowing that facility to be street side in that location. And then we are also proposing the addition of a 10-foot side path along the major collector street that would provide a connection to that greenway in these locations, as well as the east to west major collector, which also connects to the side path along future transit trail. And then the last proposed amendment is changing the terminus of the future Deer Creek Greenway extension. That specific location will be determined through the site plan development process as we work with the applicant to see what works best for their site. However, the idea here was that we do not want to be bringing people all the way up to US 64 where there's no safe crossing and no street side facilities for people to go along. There are no programmed municipal or state projects to complete any of the facilities shown here, so these would all be with private development. Planning staff recommend supporting the proposed amendments. They also have support from staff in transportation, infrastructure, and development, fire, police, and parks, rec, and cultural resources. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Shelley.
Yes. One lowball question, what's the difference between a street side path and a greenway on the side of the street?
So maintenance responsibilities is one. Our Public Works department would maintain the side path. Parks and Rec would be responsible for approving both the design and then maintenance of a greenway trail. Signage, potentially the distance from the roadside, landscaping. Typically, if a greenway is adjacent to a road, we work to make sure it feels like a greenway instead of a wide sidewalk.
why would we prefer side path or greenway one over the other? Or is it just kind of almost interchangeable from the city's view?
No, I mean, so we want this to be designated, signed, mapped as Reedy Branch Greenway. And so that was actually a request from the Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources Department.
Additional questions for Shannon?
Okay, thank you.
Shannon. We will open the public hearing for this amendment to transportation. There's nobody. Anyone in the public want to speak on this? Okay. All right. So we will close the hearing, and then we will hold for a vote. And then Shelley, you're going to come up and present on rezoning case 22CZ 22 Elevate 64 West Putnam.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you've probably already figured out based on Shannon's rezoning, we're kind of up here in the northwesterly portion of town, close to the edge of our jurisdiction. Deer Creek is to the west, as well as Triangle Math and Science Academy. There are properties to the south and east that are residential or forestry uses, and then across the street we have similar types of uses as well. This particular project is about 35.15 acres. It's currently zoned rural residential. It is within the town's ETJ. As you can see, the properties to the north are Wake County R80W. To the east, we have neighborhood business conditional zoning and west. To the west, we have neighborhood business conditional zoning and PUD CZ zoning, and to the east, we have additional RR, as well as to the south. The applicant is proposing to rezone this to planned unit development conditional zoning. This is consistent with the 2045 land use map. That map designates this area as mixed use, high density residential, office employment, and commercial services. The proposed uses within the development or within the proposed rezoning comply with that designation. Because this has 3 stripes to it, the town also has a policy of requiring 30% of the site to be reserved as non-residential, and the proposed rezoning does that. The parcels are mostly wooded with several streams throughout. On the existing conditions, we've highlighted in blue the existing farm pond and then buffered streams with some wetlands shown as well. The applicant conducted their neighborhood meeting report on September 29th, 2022. That report is attached to your staff report. We also received a letter of impact from Wake County Public Schools, and that letter indicates that elementary and high schools within the current assignment area are expected to have insufficient capacity for future students. It does state, however, that expansion or construction within the next 5 years may address those concerns at both levels. The applicant is proposing the following uses. For residential, they're proposing condominium and multifamily or apartment. They also have a variety of non-residential uses that they're proposing. I'm not going to read all of them to you, so I'll pick out a few, though, that seem fairly characteristic of those uses for you. One would be daycare facility. We've also included restaurant general, medical or dental office or clinic, office, business or professional, microbrewery, and retail sales general. The applicant is also meeting the recommendations of the draft Affordable Housing Incentive Plan. Their proposal is that at least 20 residential units, or 5% of the total, whichever is greater, will be designated as affordable housing for 10 years and occupied by households earning no more than 80% of the Raleigh AMI. These are the example elevations that the applicant has provided as a part of the PUD. These are for the residential portion, and these are for the non-residential portion. The architectural conditions that they proposed are consistent with what we typically see for rezonings of this type and for uses of this type. In addition, they've offered a maximum of 392 residential units are proposed. A maximum building height will be 60 feet and 4 stories for residential units, and 40 feet and 2 stories for non-residential. There will be no minimum setbacks or buffers along the shared property line between the residential and non-residential sections. And the residential buildings will be set back at least 95 feet from the southern parent property line, where it's adjacent to forestry use. The application is meeting the UDO's requirement for 25% of the site to be RCA. The proposed layout will preserve the existing pond, as well as buffered streams and other environmentally sensitive areas on the site. The buffers in general meet or exceed the requirements of the UDO. There are only 2 places where they don't exactly, where they're slightly reduced from the UDO requirement. On the southern side of this new local connector here. Now, keep in mind, local connectors do not actually have required buffers along them. In this general area, because the southern property is forestry, we would typically see a 50-foot type A buffer. Because the applicant was required to provide this local connector, they're providing a 30-foot type B buffer on the southern side, then the road, and then a 10-foot type A buffer on the northern side. That 10-foot type A buffer is not required by the UDO. And then the only other area of reduction is along the eastern boundary. The eastern properties, this piece in particular here, the kind of triangle that you see, is actually residential. Portions of this, though, of the larger parcel are used as forestry and agriculture. And along the forestry portions, we would typically see a 50-foot type A buffer. The applicant is providing a 20-foot type B buffer in those areas, except where a very small smidge of Lawson Lane encroaches into this property. In that case, the applicant is committing to at least a 10-foot type B buffer, even if that means they have to offset it further into their site. All of the other buffers are consistent with the UDO or improvements on it. The PUD will be served by Town of Apex water, sewer, and electrical systems, and those designs will meet the current town master plans for all of those utilities. This project does comply with the proposed map updates that Shannon discussed earlier. In addition, a TIA was performed as a part of this PUD. It's consistent with the town standards. Based on that TIA, the following improvements are proposed for this development. There will be only one access point from 64. This access will allow right in, right out, and left in, but no left out. So as a part of that, they'll be building a right in turn lane with the appropriate deceleration, a right out turn lane with the appropriate acceleration, and then a left over with the appropriate deceleration lane. The main road from the site will be a north-south major collector, again, as Shannon already discussed. It will be constructed from 64 to the southern boundaries of the property. In addition, at Pinefield Road, which is roughly here-ish, there will be a concrete median diverter island constructed, and that's to prevent southbound left turns from Pinefield Road. Pinefield Road is actually on the northern side of 64. Actually, let's pretend we're looking at this. It would be right about here, if that makes sense. So that's just to make certain that people won't be turning left out of Pinefield and engaging all of that additional traffic. In addition, they'll also construct the east-west local connector street here, you see within their project boundaries. In addition, cross-access will be provided in 3 locations where you see these hot pink arrows to the eastern, western, and southern properties as well. This project was reviewed by the Apex Environmental Advisory Board on July 20th. The applicant has actually added all of the recommended conditions that the EAB proposed, although their offer does modify one of those conditions. The modified condition was that originally 25 kilowatts of solar PV system were proposed for this development. The developer was not able to make that number work, and instead has offered that 7.5 kilowatts will be installed with the development. All of that solar installation will be completed or under construction prior to 90% of the building permits being issued, and the system may be spread across one or more of the buildings as needed. In addition, the applicant has proposed that they will preserve and protect the existing pond. The project will install at least 10 pet waste stations throughout the community in publicly accessible and appropriate areas. In order to increase biodiversity within the landscaped areas, the applicant is committed to a minimum of 75% of the species to be native to North Carolina. No invasive species will be permitted, and no single species of tree or shrub will constitute more than 20% of the plant material of its type within a single development site. The developer will also provide 5% of all parking spaces as EV charging spaces. That's over and above the UDO's required 3%. Post-development peak runoff will not, they're going above and beyond the stormwater requirement by treating the 100-year storm, where this area typically just requires the 25-year storm. And no clearing or land disturbance will be permitted within the riparian buffer, except the minimum necessary to install required sewer, greenways, roadways, and SCM outlets. The SCM water storage and treatment area will not be permitted within the riparian buffer, and sewer will be designed to minimize impacts to the riparian buffer. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Advisory Commission reviewed this as part of their November 30th, 2022 meeting, and unanimously recommended a fee in lieu of dedication with credit for the construction of the Greenway Trail within the project boundary, as well as off-site into portions of Deer Creek. As a part of this, the developer will extend the public Reedy Creek Greenway from the existing Deer Creek subdivision to the western property line of their project. Planning staff recommends approval as proposed by the applicant. The proposal complies with the 2045 land use map, and we consider it reasonable and in the public interest because it will construct portions of the new major collector and local connector streets, build portions of the Greenway network, add to the local housing stock, provide affordable housing units, and implement stricter environmental conditions than the UDO requires. We did have one email from one resident, it's from Brian Smith. He owns the property to the south and unfortunately was not able to be here tonight. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. The applicant is also here as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Shelley?
I have one.
Yes,
So
sir.
I know that we're possibly voting on the amendment to the Thoroughfare Collector Street Plan,
Yes, sir.
but that aside, is there only one in and out for 400 units on the 64? Is that where is that?
That is correct. The UDO allows, when they're building these larger style roads, the major collectors and portions of thoroughfares, to allow them to have one connection point back out to a road like 64. Because what we actually do is we count the number of connection points to the major thoroughfare. So they would have this road, which is one. We anticipate seeing another driveway access in this general area, so that would be 2. And then there would be a third one here if they can bridge that space between. So I understand it's kind of unusual compared to what we typically see, but that is the way the UDO is written.
So, okay. Okay. I just thought with that many units, I thought there had to be so many in and outs. And
If they weren't building that major collector, you would be absolutely correct. That's the difference.
major collector. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
So tack on to that question, so that local collector to the south on the property, that does connect to Lawson Lane, or it will not right now?
The anticipation is that it will not just as yet. That may be something that could change if conversations with the local residents are okay with that. But my understanding is that the intention is not to connect it just yet, so as to allow continued privacy for those residents. And since it's essentially a wide driveway, it's a gravel road that's not got any kind of formal state maintenance or anything on it, we wouldn't typically connect to a local driveway. And even though it's called Lawson Lane, that's essentially what it is. It's just a very, very long driveway that's shared.
So the major collector is just going to stub into the Seagroves property to the south, right?
The major collector will, yes, and then the local connector, and I always write collector instead of connector, but there is a difference. They're smaller. We'll just stub to the east.
Additional questions for Shelley?
I'm sure the resident or the applicant has plenty to say for you, so I'll let them speak.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here this evening on behalf of Signature Property Group, the developer of this site. And also with me tonight are Craig Taylor with Signature Property Group, and also Joe Faulkner with CE Group, our civil engineer on the project. So they'll both be available for any questions too. And we're excited tonight to present to you a mixed-use project that we're calling Elevate 64 West. And this is really the first phase of that project to get the rezoning done. And so the request is to rezone the property to a PUD to allow the mix of uses that we're proposing. And thanks to Shelley for kind of laying out the context of the area. I tried to do the same thing here because there is a ton of development going on in this corridor. But our site in particular is two parcels that total about 35 acres, called out in red on the screen, directly to the west, right here is the Mabapani Foundation, and they're actually a nonprofit who focuses on helping orphans in South Africa. So they've been there a long time and plan to remain there. And then to the south of them is the Deer Creek subdivision, which was developed fairly recently and includes a mix of townhomes and single-family homes. And then as you can see to the south is the Seagroves family farm, and then there's also some kind of residential agricultural undeveloped land directly to the east. And then you can see some of the other projects called out here. It's a busy area. The Legacy Station Apartments just to the east received their site plan approval like late last fall, and so those will be underway shortly. Obviously, you've got the Apex Gateway site on the north side of US 64, and then the light industrial project you heard tonight. So there's a lot going on, and we think this site is a really good opportunity to kind of meet some of the demand from the area, the close area around the site, and then also the economic development projects that are underway in Chatham County that will inevitably send traffic this way and west into Chatham County. And as Shelley mentioned, the current zoning is rural residential, and I think it's interesting to look at the map because even if a lot of the land here is undeveloped, there aren't many pockets of rural residential left this close to 64. So you can see those in the brown color there. And then, as I mentioned, the request is to rezone to planned unit development, and the PUD was really a good vehicle for this project with the mix of uses and the different commitments we're making. And then the land use map designation here is the mixed use designation that's shown by the kind of candy cane striping you see in different areas of town. And so we've worked hard to develop a layout and plan that really speaks to the vision of the designation, for there to be a mix of residential, commercial, and potential office employment uses. And so with that in mind, we've developed this concept plan, which is part of our PUD text. And so just from a high level, you can see the different uses we're proposing in different colors. In blue, we've got our multifamily uses, which will be a max of 392 units. Market rate and affordable, which I'll get to in a minute. And then also the kind of neighborhood non-residential uses we're showing in yellow at the northwest of the site. And we went through several different iterations of where each use was located, and think that with the road network and the layout that this is really the best design that will bring some kind of non-residential uses along US 64. And as Shelley mentioned, some of the uses there are things like medical office, vets. I know there's a shortage of vets in certain areas of Apex. And then some, restaurant, neighborhood retail uses. And the hope is that eventually it can be somewhat of a walkable mixed-use area with the extension of the greenway. That's another big part of this. You can see in the dotted line at the bottom of the screen, the greenway construction we'll actually be doing. For whatever reason, the Deer Creek neighborhood stubbed their greenway at the bottom of this dotted line. So even though there's an easement there, it's not built over their common area. And so we'll be coming in and doing that offsite improvement to get the greenway up to our site. And then to the major collector you see here. We have talked to Parks and Rec and planning staff about where exactly that greenway should stop. And just today we were discussing with staff, whether it should extend just shortly past that major collector or stop where it's shown here. And so those conversations are still ongoing. And so we've just got to nail that down with staff over the next week or so. And then Shelley did a good job of describing the buffers. We have spoken with Ryan Smith, and we've been talking with him since last fall about how we can develop our buffers and design them to respect the use of his family's property. And right now we're showing a 50-foot type A buffer in the turquoise area there, which is actually our stormwater area. So there'll be a 50-foot buffer, and then the stormwater pond, and then the riparian buffer that you see in green. So that side will really be, there's a lot of separation there from our development to the farmland to the south. And then it's a similar situation against the local connector there. And when we were moving those streets around with the transportation plan, this was the best location based on conversations with staff to get that east-west connection. And so we've kind of bisected the buffer there with a 30-foot buffer adjacent and then a 10-foot on the north side of that collector. So altogether, it'll be at least 90 feet of separation there because you have the 30-foot buffer, the 50-foot right-of-way, and then the 10-foot buffer to the north of it. And then the other buffers are per the UDO, generally, as Shelley mentioned. And then the pond on the north side of the property is a big part of this project too. A lot of times when you see these requests come in, they're older farm agricultural ponds on the property, and they're not always great looking. They get kind of stagnant. This one is the exception. It's a really nice looking pond. And so the goal is to incorporate that into the design and be kind of an amenity for the neighborhood there with the residential on one side and then the neighborhood commercial uses on the other. And so overall, and another thing is the cross access we're showing, those are shown in pink. And so the idea is that eventually this north-south collector will go all the way to Olive Chapel to provide some interconnectivity there that's not there now and try to get some people off US 64. And then another big part of this project is the affordable housing commitment. We've worked with staff throughout the process to try to design the commitment instead of just picking an AMI out of thin air. And so what we're proposing is 20 affordable units at 80% AMI. And to get to that income level, we tried to look at different different jobs in Apex and Wake County, what they pay, and how we can target those. Because as we looked at, for example, 60% AMI, some of those jobs like police officers and teachers would have been excluded from the units, and that wasn't our goal, especially in this area. So, I know, just 2 or 3 years ago, Apex wasn't getting many affordable units, and now another project I had was, I think, the most rental units at 13, and now we're proposing 20. So we're excited about that, and and being able to do that, and hopefully target some of the kind of workforce jobs for people who work in Apex but might not be able to live there now. And then, as Shelley mentioned, there were 7 recommendations from the EAB, and we've committed to all 7, but did modify the suggested solar commitment. And the reason for that is that with the larger system that serves the residential units, there's some concerns with how, in an apartment community, with how that energy is passed on to the units and kind of distributed. So Craig can talk more about that if there are questions, but so where we wound up was with a 7.5 kilowatt system that will serve the common area and pool, hopefully to reduce some of the carbon footprint of the common area over the life of it. And then we're also offering 5% as EV charging spaces. We're preserving the pond, as I mentioned, pet waste stations, native landscaping, and then the stormwater commitment is above the typical requirement of treating the 20-year storm. So because of the proximity to Jordan Lake, we've increased that to the 100-year storm, and that pond will be in the rough location at the bottom of the screen in turquoise that I showed earlier. And then this is an elevation that's just representative of what this could look like. It's actually another project that Signature is doing in Fuquay. The final design of these units hasn't been done yet, so they could take a similar look, but they will be subject to the architectural conditions of the PUD, which commit to kind of a higher standard of design that I think you're used to seeing in a lot of cases in Apex, and those were worked out with staff. And so kind of in conclusion, we're excited about this project. We think it brings market rate and affordable housing and some non-residential uses in an area that's growing quickly and is only going to continue to grow with Wolfspeed and VinFast and the economic development projects in Chatham County. And so for that reason, we think it's in the public interest and respectfully ask for you to recommend approval. Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant?
I've got potentially 2. One, this is more keying off of Ryan's email that he sent us, because he has the property to the south, and with looking at the concept plan that you have in the packet, a lot of the residential is going to be kind of focused in that southern end. Are there any plans for like maybe some fencing or something to sort of keep people, because it's with that road not going through and the stub road there, I feel like people are just going to go back there and just dump potentially and do things.
So the developer talked with Ryan early on in the process, and a fence was one of the first things that we discussed and offered actually. And then Ryan came back and he had some concerns about wildlife being able to travel back and forth with the fence. So we didn't include that commitment. And then I understand maybe late last week, Craig actually talked to Ryan again about a fence and whether that, and Ryan was worried about some of the burning in a wood fence. And so the discussion led to kind of a metal fence and what that would look like. So we're open to doing that, but just want to work it out with him and make sure he's, firmly decided exactly what he wants there along his property line. So.
Okay. And then 2, which you just touched on, is the burning. Because of the voluntary agricultural district, he can burn. Is there any concern, I guess, on your part about if that does happen with all those residential units being right there, it could be potentially detrimental or?
Right. There's not, I don't know the exact frequency of the burnings, but I don't think it's that often. Craig, I don't know if you have any other information about that. Craig has talked with Ryan most of the time, so.
Hi, I'm Craig Taylor with Signature Property Group. I live on Tremont Drive in Greensboro. I've talked to Mr. Smith several times. He's a great guy. I enjoy engaging with him. He's concerned about being able to use his property as he historically has, and we want him to be able to do that. We're not concerned about the burning being detrimental to our property. The size of the buffers that we provided are, plenty safe. There's also a fire break, a large fire break between his property and the existing property line. And he's a very conscientious guy. He talks a lot about how he follows, safe burning practices as required by law and those things. So right now, I think he has been burning his entire property maybe every 4 years. Now he's talking about maybe he'll do a quarter of it every year, which sounds better to me, simply because I think residents looking out the window seeing a large fire may be a little more concerned than if they get used to seeing a small one every now and then. So I think it's something we can educate residents on. We also committed to Mr. Smith that if he would provide notice to property management that a burn was going to occur, we would distribute that notice to all the residents so they'd be aware of it, not be alarmed when they see this controlled burn in the woodland. So overall, we feel like it's a really manageable situation and have no concerns about being his neighbor.
Matthew, is there a schematic plan for the neighborhood?
There's not yet. So at this stage, we typically stay pretty general where buildings can go and kind of keep it to the pods you see here. But I don't know if you've got anything to add about that, Craig, but yeah, really that'll come after when we file our major site plan application. We'll show where specific buildings are. But just by virtue of the riparian buffer in green, and then also the stormwater pond, and then the road construction, there really aren't a lot of places buildings can go. So you can kind of tell generally where they'll be placed just from this graphic. So.
I have one point of clarification, 2 questions. I'll start with the questions first. And I don't mean this to be a pun, but like Elevate, these are 4-story elevated products, so I assume that it could be usable for age in place, like senior folks?
I believe so. Will there be elevators? Yeah, there'll be elevator served units. So yes, it'd be open to seniors.
And then number 2, a lot of people out here are really concerned about schools. I think that's more of a Wake County concern, but it is a concern nonetheless of a lot of folks. 200 single family and 192 2-bedroom. I saw the breakdown. Do you anticipate a lot, if any, students coming out of this community?
Yeah. No, I think typically what Craig has seen is that with 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, they tend to attract younger couples and less children. That doesn't mean that there won't be children in the project. But we did look specifically at the schools in the area. The middle school is Lufkin Road, and that's actually uncapped, so there's not a problem there. The high school is capped, but we expect that construction, I know Felton Grove is in the pipeline, and I think that high school is slated to be completed around 2025. And we, in the context of the school situation, kind of mapped out our timeline and feel like, our first students in this project will be here probably late 2025 at the earliest, and the full build out won't be completed until the end of 2026. So there's plenty of time between now and then, getting through the site plan process and then actual construction to understand what the school situation is and whether those schools that are in the pipeline have kind of come to fruition. So, and we've also looked at the elementary school situation and know that there's Woods Creek Elementary that's close, and then some other schools also. I know Shelley can speak to it in more detail than I can, since she kind of oversees the school construction. But we feel like with our timeline and the schools that are coming, that we're in a good place to have capacity. So.
Final point, stormwater. I gave Mr. Roach the what for on the previous case, but one thing that you guys indicated is that you're going to treat the larger storm events, but to be clear, you're going to over detain, not treat.
Correct. Right.
My position is, on sites like this, treatment's more necessary flowing into Jordan Lake than over detention. Over detention, if there was like structures downstream where there's loss of life potential, you'd want to protect that through detaining more water upstream. Right. I don't think we have that concern here. I think we do have more of a concern on nutrient controls being part of the Jordan Lake. I don't know that we need to change the language on that proffer now. But moving forward, I would encourage, planning and our stormwater group to kind of get ahead of that, because I think it is something more prevalent in this area to go after nutrient controls than it is detention requirements. Just, speaking as a concerned neighbor here, as well as looking out for, our critical watershed. But all in all, I think it's pretty cool what you guys are doing. So,
and we can certainly look into adding something that would say that we treat the quality too, on top of just the detention. So.
Additional questions for the applicant?
One more question. So you got one access to the development at this point, and that's only on Highway 64. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because
yes.
the crossovers aren't in place yet. And so I guess fire department was okay with just having the one access on 64 for 400 units?
As I understand it, yes.
Okay. This seems like a bottleneck for that big of a development for fire and EMS. But.
Yeah, and part of it is that, some project has to be the first project. And so, I think in the overall goal of improving connectivity, I think the roads that are part of our project are really important to improving access for properties to the south and to the east that may redevelop in the future. And so without kind of that first project to come along and start building those connectors, it just would sit that way, and you've also got to have a big enough project to absorb the cost of that type of road construction. So that's part of it too.
Okay.
Additional questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I will open up the public hearing for rezoning case for Elevate 64 PUD.
Matthew.
All right. Any additional folks? And I know we had Mr. Smith's email. Did we have additional emails? Shelley, Amanda?
That's the only one.
Okay. All right, very good. So I will close the public hearing and bring it back for discussion and possible motion.
I think it's good to see some retail, more retail on 64 proposed. I wish there was more of it than condos. I know we touched upon school capacity. To my knowledge, there's insufficient space for most, right? At the moment. Which is always a problem, right? I live not too far from here, not too far from Ryan. I am excited that we have bigger long-term plans for connecting the roads, the long-term plans, and being near all the other proposed commercial light industrial areas, it makes sense to me for scale and proportion. And yeah, I'd like to hear what other board members think about.
I would, I think you're spot on with, being in context along Highway 64, the density and near the jobs, and, this is where we want the mixed use. As far as elevations go, and again, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, no offense, but this looks like a hotel to me. But again, it checks the box as far as what, we need in the area. I wish we could get something a little cooler, but it is. I mean, I like the second picture a little bit better in the staff report.
It's the green.
It must be the green and the beige. I don't know, but it looks like, but yeah, it seems pretty vanilla for multifamily in the area. But moving forward, I don't know how during a zoning we could ask for something cooler. I don't know. Cooler is in the eye beholder, so I don't know. It is what it is. But for all the other purposes, this is just, I believe, a great project. So I'm in support of it.
I will say that things that stuck out to me, I was pleased. Of course, schools are definitely a concern of mine, but I was, one, pleased to hear that it could be remedied in 5 years. I will say, as serving on the Affordable Housing Committee, I was excited to see this project come before us with so many of the different pieces that come out of, whether it's the EAB or the affordable housing, that make it work and pull it all together. And while I would love a different aesthetic with you there, I was, excited to see that it is happening. The conversations in the Affordable Housing Board is, these pieces are hard to make happen. It's hard to have the affordable housing and the EAB recommendations and these pieces, and here we brought it all together. And I have concerns that I think several folks have raised around 400 units and the traffic. I'll say that is a real concern, but I'm looking to our folks in transportation and going to be assured that between EMS and transportation that this is safe. So yeah, I'll bring it back to the board for additional discussion or possible motions. Although, Shelley, do we need to vote on the transportation amendments first?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Otherwise, the plan, if you vote to approve the PUD, it's not compliant with the transportation plan first. So transportation and then PUD, please.
So open it up for further discussion and or possible motion on transportation amendment and the rezoning case.
I'd like to make a motion. Go.
Before we vote, I just want to make a discussion that I do like the affordable housing, and we definitely are in need of that. The right in, right out on 64 for 400 units just seems like a nightmare. There's how many cars are going to be leaving in the morning and coming back? 500-600 out of a right in, right out onto a core. That it just seems like that's not. Hopefully, they can connect the road soon.
Yeah.
Because other than that, it's going to be bad. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I agree. I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
To approve amendments to the transportation plan rezone, case number 22CZ22.
No second. Thank you.
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
All right. Give me that was 2 and 2 opposed. Okay.
So that was the opposition to the transportation plan amendments?
Yes. That was.
You brought up, which case did you bring up?
The transportation.
The transportation amendments.
And do a revote?
Yep. Can I just call for a revote?
You can, yes.
All right, so.
Should I make a motion again?
Make a motion again.
I'd like to make a motion to approve amendments to transportation plan rezone case 22CZ22.
I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And then we will take possible motion on Elevate 64 West PUD.
I think we have to start somewhere, and this is probably the first closest to 64 project. to happen, to continue the transportation plan, so I'm in favor of it. I would like to make a motion to approve case number 22, CZ 22.
And second?
I'll second.
And before we take the vote, I just want to be on record. The reason why my dissent is when we were looking at things such as like Smith Farm tying into Sweetwater, there was a design that was going to happen all the way from Olive Chapel Road all the way to 64, and there was going to be a strip laid down prior to the build out. So this was already, we know where we're going. We're going to put the road down. If we do it this way, we're guaranteed to put all these homes right on the highway without knowing if the other properties will ever go under construction. We don't know if the other property owners will ever sell. We don't know. So that's my concern. It's not necessarily about the project. It's not personal. It's just the future of it. We can't guarantee where it's going to go. And I think it's very important that we have the connectivity laid out where we need to go and everybody's on board.
Thank you for that.
I agree as well. I just feel like it's just not enough for the amount of people that will be coming in and out of there with the uncertainty involved, so.
Additional discussion?
Well, I think that those of you that know me know that house fires are near and dear to my heart. So I look at that very carefully. Also know that Apex follows pretty much the international code, fire code. Section 106.2, projects with more than 200 dwelling units. Multifamily residential projects having more than 200 dwelling units shall be provided with 2 separate and approved fire apparatus access roads, regardless of whether they are equipped with an approved automatic sprinkler system. So I think regardless of anything else, before it goes to town council, something's going to have to be done for the access to that property. Because I understand your point and agree with it. I don't want to be the southernmost, easternmost house sitting on that property and it catch fire at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So.
Thank you.
I guess as a civil engineer, my commentary to that is, well, understand that this is a major collector road, and the point of that being a wider street section that EMS and fire apparatus vehicles can lay down and have alternate means of ingress and egress. So while it's not a one size fits all, my concern would be that, and to the point of fellow board members, contrarily, I don't believe that other property owners should dictate the rights of these folks to move forward with what I consider a pretty good development for the town. I think they are meeting the code. I think that there are 2 fire stations, one off of, Apex Barbecue and Kelly, and then another one off of Jenks and Wimberley that are within 4 minutes of here. So I think it meets the international fire code. So I have less.
2 accesses.
What's that?
No, it doesn't have 2 accesses. It just has 1.
Fire truck's going to go where it goes when emergencies. I mean,
it can't go through the woods.
You can go through a wider street.
Right, but I mean,
yeah,
it's supposed to have 2 accesses.
Well, yes, but for the fact that it's a larger collector under the UDO, I believe that's. I think you had mentioned that that's acceptable.
To add to that, it's a 4-story multifamily high-density home, so I'm not sure off the top of my head about the North Carolina building code, but I believe it is fully sprinkler.
Right,
Yeah.
but more than 200 units is regardless of whether it's sprinkler
And then
or
in the
not.
building code, there are, buffer zones from that edge of the parking to the building structure occupant.
Right, but I think it's a good project, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that my gut feeling is it's going to face a lot of resistance from fire, which then will proceed to have resistance from town council if there's not an auxiliary means to get to the property.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. I do not recall if there was a second. I apologize.
I did second, yes.
You did second, thank you. So, so I have additional comments. I will call for a vote. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
Can I get a show of hands who were the no's? Just, okay. And just a reminder, we'll need you to fill out the dissenting votes form. That's either a PDF on your computer, or I can give you a hard copy of that to write the reasons why you dissented, so we can provide that to town council.
All right, this measure passes by a vote of, no, this measure, yep, 4-3.
That's why I asked for the schematic. I wanted to see where the location.
All right, thank you. Then we have item number 4, public hearing and possible motion regarding rezoning case on Center City Townhomes. Lauren?
Yes, hello. Hopefully this will be short and sweet for you. The applicant has requested a 60-day continuance, proposing that the new planning board public hearing date will be May 8th, 2023.
Thank you.
And the applicant is here to speak to it as well.
Do we need to make a motion towards that, or do we need to grant the continuance?
I think we have to make a motion.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to continue case, oh crap, I closed it.
22 CZ 27.
22 CZ 27 to the May planning board meeting.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, opposed? All right. Continuance granted. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a great night.
All right. Can I ask for a motion for a brief moment before we approve the UDO?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 5 minutes? 5 minutes? You have some UDOs.
Yes, yes. So this First Amendment is a recommendation from the Planning Committee of Town Council, and the goal of the changes is to move the requirement for the Environmental Advisory Board's review of a rezoning from pre-application to post-application or during the staff review portion of the process, and to also add a requirement for an additional neighborhood meeting that's after the submittal. So we already have a requirement for a pre-application neighborhood meeting. So this would be an additional neighborhood meeting to be held after submittal and in the month prior to the anticipated public hearing date. The purpose is to allow the developer to provide updated information on the application to the community, and for them to provide feedback on the revised plan. Associated with that, if that amendment is adopted, the neighborhood meeting instructions would be revised for rezonings to reduce the minimum meeting time from 2 hours to 1 hour. Currently, it's a 2-hour requirement. The Planning Committee of Council also discussed changing the timing of the votes to allow for rezonings to be voted on at the meeting after the public hearing is held. That authority already exists within the ordinance, so no amendment was necessary. Also, state law has changed. In the past, a rezoning required 2 votes, 2 readings, unless it passed, it required 2 readings. Now the state law only requires 1 reading, and the vote, a supermajority or 4/5 vote is not required. It can be passed with just a simple majority. So no changes to the UDO will require, but it is anticipated that council may use its authority to continue votes to a subsequent meeting on some rezonings. So the changes are in the ordinance are represented for Section 219 to change pre-application to staff review for the Environmental Advisory Board timing, and for neighborhood meetings to indicate that there's an additional neighborhood meeting report and requirement that's required in the month prior to the Planning Board public hearing date. Any questions on that amendment? Okay. The final amendment is a request from staff. We have a section for townhomes detached, that the alley and driveways that basically that no more than 10 lots can be on a single alleyway without an intervening alleyway. We only have 1 townhome detached development, and that's basically where they own the structure and the lot. Just like a townhome lot, it's really small, but it looks like a single family structure. We only have, I think, 1, maybe 2 of those in all of Apex, and we're not really sure why it needs a different standard than applies to single family detached and townhomes. So the proposal is to simply have that type of development comply with the same standards as all other townhomes and single family for alleys. And staff is recommending approval of both of these amendments. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Amanda. Are there any questions?
Amanda, on the first, it was 227 neighborhood notice. To be clear, you're not required 2 meetings. It's only if you exceed the 1 month duration between when it's heard at planning board and when you hold the meeting. You would need to hold at least, it has to be in that month, or is that right?
I'm not exactly.
Oh, wait a minute, you would, because you have to hold them before staff. Okay,
Yes.
so you would have to. Okay.
Right. The requirement to have the neighborhood meeting in the pre-application stage stays unchanged.
Okay.
This is an additional neighborhood meeting to be held in the month prior to the anticipated planning board hearing date. So basically, as close as you can get to the planning board cutoff deadlines for staff reports and all of the agenda items. So it's essentially the final version of the proposed rezoning.
This is to try to iron out the details before it gets here.
So yeah, because inevitably after staff gets to review and we get additional feedback and hear from the community, we read the neighborhood meeting report and suggest additional changes to the application. It looks different almost always than it did when the applicant first shared the information with the neighborhood. And so this allows the neighborhood to see and hear from the applicant what the rezoning looks like at that point. So there's not all these concerns and questions and unanswered questions that the neighborhood may have when it actually gets to public hearing. And that way, if there's still outstanding concerns, then maybe the developer, in hearing additional feedback, may want to make additional changes to address those concerns before it reaches the point here in this room.
Yeah, I was excited when I saw it. I thought, oh, wonder if I had suggested that at some point in time down the line, just with the idea that before it comes to us is, you know, that timing is literally, there would sort of be, I know sometimes in the meeting minutes, there's the, you know, don't have questions, don't have answers to these questions, we'll get back with you, and then they're, you know, they come before us and the questions have not been answered. And I feel like this will not only sort of allow for some ironing out to happen that sometimes happens here, but also allows for some of those questions that have been brought up earlier to then be an opportunity for them to be answered again before it even comes here. So my hope is it means a more streamlined process before projects hit us. But
right, and it's staff's proposal that these changes would take effect May 1st to allow time for ones that are already in the process to not get hung up.
Additional questions for Amanda? Possible motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the UDO text amendments as proposed by staff.
Ryan making a moment?
A second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moment is adopted. UDO is adopted as amended. And thank you, Amanda. One final motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.